before, because we have two different types of templates that will have to be used. So how do we select from one and from the other? For that, we're going to need a template selector. So I will create inside of the user controls folder, because this is still related to the view, but it's also related to the user controls. So inside of this user controls folder, I will create a new empty class that I will call chat view cell template selector. And my chat view cell template selector will have to inherit from data template selector, for which I will need a using directive to the submarine.forms, and I will need my class to implement the abstract class, which means that we need an onSelect template overridden method defined inside of this class. And notice the onSelect template method is already going to receive the item. The item, it turns out, is going to get the binding context for this particular data template. So in our case, because we are going to be setting this as the template for the list view, we're going to be receiving each and every one of the items inside of the messages observable collection, which are chat messages, which means that right from onSelect template, we will have access to the particular chat message that has to be displayed, which of course will have information about whether this is incoming or not, which is enough for us to decide what type of view cell we have to return. So let's go ahead and make that evaluation. I am going to get the chat message first and foremost, which is the item as a chat message, which is this type. Of course, I will need a using directive to bot.viewModel.mainVM, which is where this class is defined. And what I will have to do first is evaluate if chat message is different than null. If it is, then we can go ahead and make the evaluation, but if it is not, that means that we don't have really anything to evaluate in here, so I will just return null at the end. But if this is a null, then I can go ahead and evaluate if isIncoming is true or false and act accordingly. Now here is where I actually have to return the data template, that one which the view cell has to use. And for this, let me actually define the two data templates that this template selector could return. I will define a couple of private read-only data templates. And the first one is going to be the incoming data templates, and the second one is going to be the outgoing data template. And in the constructor, I'm going to be initializing them. So the incoming data template is going to be equal to a new data template, and the data template, notice that has three overrides. The one that I want to use is the second one, which is going to receive the type that this data template is going to use to be created, which is going to be the incoming view cell. And of course, I will have to do the similar thing for the outgoing data template. Of course, this one is going to be using the outgoing view cell to be created. And so these data templates, now that they are created directly from the constructor, are the ones that have to be returned depending on the chat messages isIncoming property. So let me actually do it in one line. I will evaluate if the chat messages isIncoming property is true. If it is true, it means that we have to return incoming data template. Otherwise, we need to return outgoing data template, just like this. Evaluate the isIncoming. If this is incoming, we return the incoming data template. If this is false, that means that this is the outgoing message, so we return the outgoing data template. And this is pretty much everything that we need in the data template selector. Now we can already bind or use the selector over in the list view. For that, let me actually first copy the namespace from this class. So over here, I can add another reference. So I will create an XML namespace that is going to have an identifier of UC, just because this is coming from the user controls folder. And this is simply going to be the namespace bot.view.userControls. And so, just like we would do with a VM, we can define from UC a chat view cell template selector and set a key. Let me set this as chat template selector. And now with this created, all we have to do is over in the list view, set the item template to be that static resource that we have just created. So static resource and chat template selector, which is the key. And now the template selector is going to be the one that returns the corresponding data template. So if you remember, normally what we would do is in the list view, define the item template. In fact, let me go ahead and show you the normal thing that we would do. Inside of the list view, we define the item template like this, and inside of the data template, we define a data template. And inside of the data template, now we can define the view cell. This is basically the same thing that we are doing in here, except we have a specific template selector, which eventually is still returning a data template, which is that we have right here. And what these are going to contain are view cells. Right here, I'm defining the exact same thing. Only this time, because we have different types of templates, we need to use a selector. So now that we have the selector ready, let's go ahead and test this out on a simulator. Let me first go ahead and check this on iOS. And you will notice that, of course, there are still some things that we have to finish up, but pretty much the application should be working. Let's go ahead and make the same question that we have been testing. 32-bit versus, we send this, immediately this is added, and notice that we also see the result. Now, of course, this is not the best interface for a chat. First, these messages appear all the way to the top. Maybe it's better if they appear at the bottom. Second, there is no spacing between these bubbles. There is also the fact that when I send this, the message is still here. But you can see how pretty much the application works very well. We see all of those messages that we send. If we send another one, we see it right there. And we see the messages that we receive. So the only thing there is left to do really is modify a little bit how this application is going to look, because it works rather well. So in the next lecture, what I want to do is show you a couple of things that we can do to make this look a little bit more like a chat. But for now, you have already learned also how to use these data template selectors, which have allowed us to, in a same list view, define different view cells depending on whether this, or at least the scenario in this particular case, is that we are deciding depending on the property of the specific value that these view cells are binding from. So in the next lecture, we're going to take a look at a few things that we will improve in the sense of how this looks. For now, the bot is pretty much ready.